Middle there! Forward there!
Yeah, I've got to come down, guys. Dial it up, dial it up, dial it up!
Hello and welcome to leg 3 of the Whitbread Round the World race for the Volvo Trophy. Well, coming up, we've got the spectacular start from Fremantle. We have all the crew news with the changes and 1 or 2 surprises. The Forgotten People. We take a look behind the scenes at the Shore Cruise. And we see the boats arrive in Sydney with a nail-biting nighttime climax to leg 3. Despite no Australian entry, everyone in Fremantle has anticipated the Whitbread arrival for months. Children in schools throughout the town have adopted a boat, which has been their focus of attention since the race began. Sailing in Fremantle has an age-long tradition, with its famous and consistent onshore winds known as the Fremantle Doctor. Local and international regattas are part of the town's everyday life, but it was the 1987 America's Cup which brought the town to international attention and gave it a well-needed boost.
It's fantastic. Ever since the America's Cup, Fremantle's just boomed and continued to boom. And it happened at a time when people valued the heritage and it's kept its village atmosphere and people live and work here. It's quite fantastic.
In the first leg, Swedish Match were out of the running after the first day. But this time, they'd won the race inside the first day. They'd survived enormous weather, ridiculous seas and huge winds. In one leg, Swedish Match had gone from 0 to hero, and Crance's crew were in celebration mode. The Caverna campaign has always been understated, but there was a quiet determination from a young and motivated team, and after 2 legs, they lead the race. The only team to have filed 2 top 3 finishes as they cruised into Fremantle in second place. Not amongst the real race favourites before the start, the Viking team are now serious contenders. The top 3 position was always what Toshiba's new skipper Paul Stanbridge was aiming for. It was a relief for him and his crew to arrive in one piece, especially Dave Allen, who spent 4 days in bed after an accident. Finishing in Fremantle in third, a proud and significant moment, and celebrations amongst the crew showed renewed high morale aboard the pre-race favourites. Well, little doubt about the pecking order at the top of the fleet, though. After 2 top 3 finishes, Knut Frostad's Innovation Caverna lead the field from EF Language. Silk Cut in third, heading a group of 3 boats. Well, behind them, Toshiba back in 6th despite third place on leg 2. Lots to do for Chessie Racing. EF Education and Brunel Sanergy well adrift of the fleet in 8th and 9th.
Innovation Caverna skipper Knut Frostad and helmsman Jack Vincent took a different tack. Borrowing windsurfers from 2 Olympic sailors in Fremantle for the World Windsurfing Championships later this month, they headed back out to sea.
I think it's sort of the closest to get to the elements, you know, the closest to get to the wind and the water, and it's you have a much stronger feel of speed than you have in the boat. But I think maybe Whitbread 60 is the closest you get to this, maybe, at least in the Southern Ocean.
Well, it wasn't quite the Southern Ocean, but there was still a chance to push the equipment to its limits.
We can push hard without being scared to break the gear, especially when it's someone else's gear.
Frostad first started windsurfing in 1979 and competed for Norway in the 1988 Olympic Games, but the decision to stop competing came easily to him.
I was fed up of losing weight all the time, so I had to look for something bigger. And obviously now I could be quite fat because my boat is 60 feet long, so I can eat as much as I want, which is quite nice. And also windsurfing is for sort of a bit younger age, maybe. It's younger generations, and after you've been doing it for 10, 12 years and you start to be beaten by the young boys, you sort of think it's time to move on to the old boys game. But I do miss windsurfing a lot, really a lot, yeah. So I'm looking forward to after Whitbread to have a lot of time off from boat sailing and going back to windsurfing.
But the lasting impression of the week was without doubt the Whitbread beauty pageant, which saw team members dressed up in drag and strutting their stuff up on the catwalk. The judges faced a difficult job, but Team Toshiba emerged victorious and carried home the title, Miss Whitbread 1997. Dockside are now just a few days away from the start of leg 3. Boats and sails have been fixed and fine-tuned and are now back in the water. But over the past week, there's been a spate of firings and hirings that have been grabbing the week's headlines. Bottom of the pile, Brunel Synergy, after a disastrous performance, has seen wholesale changes. Out goes Hans Buchholz, captain for 2 legs. In, Roy Heine, the third skipper to take up the helm of the Dutch entry.
I don't think you could speak of any failures from Hans Buchholz himself. It's just a story. We came in 10th and 9th during the last 2 legs, and obviously something will have to change then if you want to improve your performance.
Another change, Gerald Rogivu, back on board after missing leg 2 due to a face-off with Buchholz. Also in, Gideon Messing and Peter van Kerk, ousting Hervé Jan and Eric Druglese. But can the new lineup deliver?
Basically, I have to learn the boat, new guys on the boat, we have to do a lot of learning. So the learning curve will be very high. We're also very limited in you can't make a sail in 3 days, so we'll be using the sails that we have, we'll be recutting the sails, and we'll using the next leg just to see what's going on. After I'll present a plan to the sponsors on how we should attack the problem further, and I'm very hopeful that we can uplift the campaign to end up halfway in the fleet at least.
Mid-fleet and feeling the bite, Chessie Racing. Good boat speed, but a shaky afterguard has called for a change. A disappointed Mark Fisher, co-skipper to owner George Collins, stays on shore for now.
I was planning on doing legs 3 and 4, but because of, as I said, some other things that I've got to deal with, I'm not going to be able to do that, but I don't think that that's a negative.
With the champagne drying up for Fisher, Collins demands a step up in gear.
No, I didn't expect to be in 7th place at this point. I expected to have better shine. We got to get back in the game.
To get Chessie on track, American legends John Kostecki and Mike Toper now join the lineup. Talk of navigator Juan Villa walking is quashed, and the Americans look set to go for leg 3. Back at the dockside, the rumour mill was still rolling. The wholesale personnel changes at the back of the fleet were matched by changes up front. Some were unavoidable. Aboard Toshiba, the 12-strong crew will include 2 new people. Skipper Paul Stambridge forced into changes through injury. Dan Fong will replace Dave Allen, whose damaged ribs have taken him out. Ken Venn is on as a routine change, but it's not something that worries Paul Stambridge.
I quite like a small flow of people, actually. It's not disruptive. It's quite nice to have fresh people, some more jokes, for example, and just, I quite like it, yeah.
On leg 2 winner, newcomer Matt Humphreys got the job he wanted. Watch leader from here on.
They made me a watch leader on the boat, which is, obviously very important to me. 2 reasons, really. I mean, firstly, it really does make me feel accepted as part of the crew, and that's something which I think is very important. And secondly, it was a position that I always did want from day one with the Whitbread race, and it seemed very important for the future and for skippering a boat in the future.
And even overall race leader Kavanagh is not home free.
You going to the piss up tonight, mate?
In order to get his soldiers marching in time, skipper Knut Frostad was forced to make space for Olympic gold medalist Torben Grail by saying goodbye to Australian Ian Barney Walker. It was a question of style, and with Frostad as skipper, Walker was always going to be the one stepping aside.
We had some differences in opinions regarding sailing and working in the project, and it's quite personal between him and me, and there's nothing for the public really, and we still have a good relationship.
With only days to go before the start of leg 3, fine-tuning of sails and boats is reaching a climax as everyone anticipates the particular challenges of the 2,250-mile journey ahead. It's the first time that the Whitbread will sail from Fremantle into Sydney, a city which was previously bypassed for Auckland, adding a further 1,000 miles to the route. The first sprint leg of the race, it's estimated to take no more than 10 days to complete.
You'd think being a shorter leg it'd be easier, but it's actually harder.
A lot of things can happen. There can be very variable conditions from a very heavy part of the leg.
It's my opinion that this particular leg is the most tactically demanding leg of the whole race.
The most crucial aspect of leg 3 will be the navigator's interpretation of the constantly changing weather patterns off the Australian coast. And every syndicate has an expert close at hand. For Mark Rudiger and Team EF, Roger Clouds Badham gives his opinions of the challenges ahead.
As fast as possible.
Well, the big feature of this leg is high pressure, and really that's what the sailors don't like. There's high pressure typically just out here in the Indian Ocean, and it's ridging through to another cell of high which is very close to the route coming round from Perth round towards Bass Strait, and then other cells of high pressure you usually find out in the Tasman Sea. Now there are some frontal systems that run along further to the south, but they're just far enough south that they can't really get down into those, so that they're going to be forced always to be on the northern side of the high pressure system with somewhere between southeast and northeasterly winds, and of course those winds are on the nose.
As always, the forecast is good news for some and not so good for others.
I think Merritt is a little bit on the extreme of being a good light air boat, and I think ourselves and Silkcut are good upwind boats. We haven't really seen a lot of that since the Fastnet as far as pure upwind work, but we might have a 150-mile hard on the wind, 25-knot beat down to Cape Lewin here. So we'll see which boats have stability in that.
Probably if it is an upwind leg, and I wouldn't necessarily agree it's an upwind leg, but if it is, there's a chance of that because they're bigger, fatter boats basically, and we're narrower and a little quicker downwind. So yeah, let's hope it's not that. We need a good leg.
Once through the bight, the navigator's troubles are far from over.
Bass Strait, this area between the southern parts of Australia and Tasmania, is renowned by yachtsmen as being an area of very strong winds, but the point is that while fronts come through and bring some very strong southwesterlies, about 1 in every 3 days, there's also 1 in every 3 days where the high pressure system follows through, and in fact there's very light winds. So you get quite a mixture of conditions, but when the fronts do go through, you can get 30, 40 knots of breeze very easily, and in fact there's a saying on King Island here that when the wind stops blowing, the cows fall over.
But Sydney is still over 2,000 miles away, and for most of the crews, it's what happens out of Fremantle that counts the most.
Well, obviously, it's always important to get a good start, and sort of once you're in top boats after a few days, it's always sort of easier to stay there, I think, because the crew is very motivated, and you get more confidence, and it's easier to control. It's always a little bit more difficult to sort of attack from behind.
But a psychological advantage at the start will not necessarily mean victory at the finish.
The other thing about this leg is that it's really going to be a leg where there's going to be catch-up going on. So it's going to be demanding that way. Everyone's going to be looking over their shoulder all the time, even if they're in front, because the guys, they could suddenly slow down and the guys behind can have wind. Not an easy leg.
After 3 weeks of rest, relaxation and running repairs in sunny Fremantle, the morning of the restart sees the crews carrying out the all-important final checks of masts and rigging. But as lunchtime approaches, and the crowds begin to gather, it's the families who take centre stage, with the familiar Whitbread kindergarten now in full swing. But whilst the children are having fun, the skippers are getting focused. None more so than Gunnar Krantz, who's desperate to prove his leg 2 victory on Swedish Match was no flash in the pan. The British boat under skipper Laurie Smith had proved its credentials on leg 2 with a new 24-hour distance world record, but so far a place in the top 3 has eluded them. Top 3 finishes are not a problem for Innovation Caverna, however. The Norwegian boat led by Knut Frostad is proving itself the most consistent boat in the fleet and is already a strong contender for overall race victory. But this is another day and another leg. A fresh start for those boats trying to get back in the race, and a potentially tricky leg to worry the boats at the front. So once the fond farewells and photo opportunities are out of the way, the boats begin to leave the dock, with all thoughts turning to the impending start. Kimo Worthington, watch leader on EF Language, thanks his shore team. As Swedish Match pushes out, skipper Gunnar Krantz briefs his crew.
I think there will be a fair bit of both. They've been announcing it on radio, newspapers, everywhere. So let's give this one a really good push. It's only maximum 10 days.
Plans for running hard out for the first 24 hours, like no sleep and something like that.
Yes, upwind will be everybody on the rail. Yeah. Just hang out, chill. Full on. Yeah, full on, because it will be light spots later on when we can catch up on the sleep. Yeah.
And on EF Language, Paul Kayard is working out the sails he'll need for the next few hours.
Behind Rado might be a hair lighter, if anything. Was it lighter behind Rado 4 years ago?
As the women on EF Education head to the start, there are a few nerves on board. What's forgotten now is left behind.
I was down on the boat really early this morning, making sure all the instruments were working and the computers were up and running, weather factors were coming in and all those sort of things. So you're always a little bit nervous, making sure that you haven't forgotten anything.
It's a good nervous, you know, everyone's got a little bit of anxiety in them. We really want a good start this time, want to get away nice and clean, be with the fleet. So that always brings up a little emotion, but everyone's fairly calm and just concentrating on what's about to happen.
The opening stage of leg 3 is a short 5-mile sprint down the coast to the first turning mark and out past the island of Rottnest. After that, the boats sail down the western coast of Australia before turning east across the Great Australian Bight. The rules permit them to pass either side of the island of Tasmania before the final approach up the coast of Sydney, 2,250 miles away.
Brilliant sunshine, big breeze, 7 knots to go to the start of leg 3, 2,000 miles, Fremantle to Sydney. That's the start. We're on board there with Innovation Caverna, but top of the picture, Yellow Jenica, that's EF Language, Paul Kayard, great start with him. On board now again, Innovation Caverna, bit of a slow hoist there, crew up the front, getting things sorted out. As we look back at the whole fleet, top of the picture, that's EF Language, they're in the lead at the moment. Huge crowds here on shore, tremendous interest in Fremantle this start, so many boats out on the water looking down on EF Language. They poured out of the Solent in the start of leg 1. Remember, they won leg 1. They struggled in leg 2 in the Southern Ocean. Leg 3, short sprint leg, could do well. On board now, Swedish Match. Great shot that, isn't it, looking up over the fleet. They look behind Toshiba. Don't want you coming past, they're saying. You're going to take our wind. On board now with Caverna. Now they've got the same problem with EF Education behind. Big breeze, but if EF Education take Caverna's breeze, they could storm past. Close to the camera, Nick Willits. He doesn't look too happy about that as the girls get a little bit of power surge on there. The girls have got the power on. There's nothing Caverna can do about it. Some spectacular shots these. The girls, they must be doing, what, 20 knots? Straight past Caverna. Remember, Innovation Caverna, overall race leaders at this stage, and they won't like that one little bit. EF Education now, they've got Silk Cut the other side, so they may slow down as their breeze gets taken away. Caverna, well, chance for revenge there, get past the girls. That's what they're going to try and do. They're not going to take the easy option, they're going to try and get past. People care about this start. You might think 2,000-mile leg, does it matter? Well, for these guys and girls, sure it does. Innovation Caverna now, power on. They've turned up. They're going to just try and railroad over the girls. These boats lifting out of the water, close to camera there. That's Lisa Charles. She's the bowman on EF Education. Quick glance behind. No, they're okay at the moment. Caverna not really making much of an impact as Caverna bow dives into the wave in front. Big waves out here, really. Big chop anyway because of all the spectator boats. So as the fleet pour down towards the bottom mark, neck and neck between EF Language with the yellow Jenica and Merritt Cup pictured here with the white Jenica. Grant Dalton desperate to have a good performance in this leg after that disaster in leg 2. Great picture that, looking down there, but top left, yellow Jenica, that's EF Language, that's Paul Kayard, and at the moment, well, I'd say he's winning. Neck and neck, though, with Merritt Cup. And at the back, well, down here you've got Brunel Sanergy right at the back. You've got Toshiba, Paul Stanbridge there on the right-hand side of the picture, close in now on Stanbridge. Got a podium position in the last leg, but here Brunel Sanergy, Roy Heiner, the new skipper, the Olympic bronze medalist, sails straight past Toshiba. But there's the aerial shot down onto the leader, EF Language, on board now. Paul Kayard steering, Olympic gold medalist, Steve Erickson, he's on tactics. And there was the America's Cup sailor, Kimo Worthington, trimming the main. Great shot there, down on the boat, star-studded cast on this boat. Let's go down, join skipper, Paul Kayard. Kayard, he thinks he's in stronger wind. He was talking to Ericsson there. He's got Merritt Cup right alongside. There's nothing in this, but they have to jibe in towards the beach. It's going to be very, very close. Looking down there on Merritt Cup. On board Kayard, they're going to have to jibe. All 12 working there. Just look at the activity. Getting that Jenica sorted. Well, that was a good jibe. On the right there, that's EF Language. On the left, that's Merritt Cup. Kayard did it. It worked. He's leading at the moment. So as they storm down towards the bottom mark, probably doing about 15, 16 knots, preparing to raise the Genoa, preparing to get the Jenica down. Yellow sail flapping there as it's on its way down. 300 square metres, that is. Further back the fleet, not much further back, Swedish Match. Pulling that Jenica down. All 12 people involved in that. So EF Language round first, good lead. Kayard's done it again. Coming in second, Grant Dalton. He'll be relieved as well. Disaster in leg 2. He's really got to have a good performance in this leg. Good start. He'll be delighted. So Merritt in second position at the moment. And those two pulled out a little bit ahead of the fleet. In third, well, it's Swedish Match, Gunnar Krantz. He had that remarkable start in Cape Town and good performance again. Real bunch there. Toshiba on the left of Swedish Match, struggling with its Jenica. Chesney just nips in front of Laurie Smith on Silk Cut. Smith prepares to jibe, tucks in there between Chesney and Brunel Sanergy. It really is like a who's who of international Grand Prix sailing round in this mark. On the left, you've got Chesney Racing, John Kostecki, you've got Laurie Smith, you've got Roy Heiner, you've got more Olympic medals than I care to mention. So on board now with EF Education as the fleet now sets sail in earnest to Sydney, and that has been an exceptionally close start, and people are saying this could well be the closest leg. It could be the chance when boat speed comes into it. Well, so far it's been exciting. I'm sure it's going to continue that way.
No sooner have the boats left Challenger Harbour, the shore crews begin packing up their containers for a 5-day journey by train to Sydney.
Due to the boats being that quick, we have to have 2 tool shops, like the white one you see behind us here. That's a complete mobile workshop, and we have to send one to every port. Like we sent one from Norway to Cape Town, the other one from Southampton and here to Fremantle. And we continue to do that all the way around, so we make sure that we have the container there when we arrive. Totally, we're talking about 30 tons of equipment from port to port. What we're doing now is packing up all the food and stuff we have for the rest of the race. It's all been in quarantine here in Fremantle. And the easiest way to get it to Sydney and for regulations and stuff is to pack it up here, put a seal on it so it's still in quarantine when we arrive to Sydney.
As well as the 1.5 tons of food, these containers hold everything the crew could possibly need for their 9 months at sea, including up to 50 sails, 150 litres of engine oil, a 6-metre dinghy, crew belongings, and much, much more. As such, it's vital they arrive in every port long before the boats. If they didn't, it would be a major disaster for the shore managers.
Well, I'd probably run away, go into hiding somewhere, probably Bali, that's close.
Before the fleet left Fremantle, some of the equipment from the containers was transferred onto the boats in preparation for the next leg. But what's left behind is as crucial to the crew as what's taken on board.
It's the day before the start of leg 3, and we're down below on Silk Cut. I'm surrounded by all our sails. There's 17 sails that we've chosen specially for this leg. It's going to be a bit more of a sprint, and we do know that the wind conditions are going to be very different compared to the last one. So we're quite excited about some of the sail developments we've made very recently, and we think it's going to be a big bonus for during this leg of the race. Here we've got the scales, and we've used these to weigh everything that's come on board. So we know exactly how much weight we have. Basically, we know we've got less than the last leg, so that's going to help us go faster. Going across here, we've got our stack of foul weather gear. Even this has been actually made lighter for this leg. Hopefully it won't get too cold. Moving across the middle of the boat, this is our galley area. It's been a big tussle whether we actually reduce any of the food, yet again to save weight. But because that might compromise our energy, we've actually, I think, maintained the level of food we've got. But even so, it's always freeze-dried. But we have made a special lightweight lid for one of the pans.
This is a silk cut container, and as you can see, it's a bit different from the others. That's because it's a chaotic mess, but we do know where everything is, just about.
The British team is one of the few boats not to have a large, dedicated shore crew, and the race crew double up on and off the boats, a situation which is far from ideal in today's Formula One-style Whitbread.
The crews work very hard. I mean, they actually have to do a lot of the preparations. And, well, it's like, if you're like other sportsmen, footballers, going and building the stadium and marking the pitch out and then going and play the game and then taking it all down again and going on to the next match. But, yeah, the physical demands on the crews are such that they do need more time off in these short stopovers.
Despite being short-handed, the British team are packed and ready to go, along with all the other containers, only 5 hours after the boats have left Fremantle.
Right, and this is another stopover, satisfactorily completed. Container lock ready to go.
As the fleet left Fremantle, there was trouble in store for race leader Innovation Caverna. Dents and small buckles were discovered on the lower part of their mast, forcing them to make for the coast and effect repairs.
Okay, this is Nick Willits aboard Caverna Innovation, and it's starting to look like another one of these legs where I never actually get to go on deck and sail the boat due to the fact that we've broken it again and we've got a bit of a major on fixing it. Right now I'm just cutting up an anchor to try and reinforce the mast. And I don't know why I always end up with these jobs. There's 11 other guys and they should be pretty handy with tools, you'd think.
But the onboard tools weren't enough. Further equipment was needed. In accordance with race rules, they anchored within 1 mile of the shore, which permitted them to receive assistance by way of a helicopter drop. The repair kit was received with thanks, enabling them to continue with the necessary repair work, which was good news for the boat, but a hard day's night for Nick Willits.
And what we ended up doing all last night since the helicopter arrived was we filled up the base of the mast with resin. It was quite a long process because you can only put small amounts in at a time. So that went on all night, and we got the mast jacks from ashore as well, and now we've got the mast jacked up to relieve the pressure on the base. And now I'm going to start trying to strengthen it all up fore and aft in case we have some more heavy weather coming. Pretty happy with the way the repair's gone so far.
Up with the rest of the fleet, it was tightly packed as the boats hugged the coastline. EF Language, who'd been first round the marker at the start, held on to the lead over Leg 2 winner, Swedish Match. But it was a close-fought battle with rarely more than 10 miles separating the fleet in the first 2 days, and the boats swapping positions regularly. And with the wind on the nose for most of the way, there was a lot of hard work above and below deck for the crews.
We have, since we started, made 20 tacks, most of them last night, on the coast. We have shifted quite a few tons of gear with 20 tacks. We have really been having this dream-like upwind with lots of tacks in the Whitbread 60. It's fantastic. You cannot get more uncomfortable or more wrestling sailing. It's just amazing.
On board the Dutch boat Brunel Sanergy, new skipper Roy Heine was experiencing the same wet and bumpy conditions, enabling him to position them in the middle of the pack. Unfamiliar territory for the boats that recorded 2 last places so far in the race.
Went round Cape Lewin,
Took a little shortcut through the reefs, made a nice gain on the girls, and then went inshore a little bit too early, big wind shift, and we ended up exactly the same place, in front of the girls again. And it's nice that all the fleets within about 5 or 6 miles of each other.
And so it remained a tightly fought contest until the rounding of Cape Lewin, where the navigators now have to decide what route to take, north or south. Back out on the water, there were more painful realities for the women aboard EF Education to endure.
So how's it been going the last couple of days?
Well, upwind, and upwind. And here we are sailing upwind again. It's been rather boring, certainly not uneventful though. We've had lots of bits and pieces go on, lots of breakages, human and mechanical. We've got 2 humans down.
One of whom was Anna Droog, who came off worst in an argument with a loose winch.
What's the winch doing down below?
Yeah, you can wonder what the wind's doing down below. But just after the start, it was taking some more halyard tension, and the bloody winch came off.
Leaving the remains of the base casing on deck, and Anna with a rather badly bruised and swollen hand.
Yeah, how's that looking now? It's a bit swollen still.
No such worries for Leah Newbold, at the helm and in freshening breeze.
Today's a little bit more pleasant than what we've had. We've actually got sunglasses on today. Managing to be able to keep them on without having to clean them every 2 minutes. And a little less banging and crashing. So today is almost pleasant.
Having repaired the damage to their mast, Caverna set about making a dent in the fleet with a bold move south, either to find more wind or to escape the upwind buffeting in the north.
It's been a bit of a hard start for us. We had a problem with the mast, so we had to stop and start some repair work. Now we're going again, and we are heading south to pick up more favorable breeze. So far we have positioned ourselves as the most southerly boat. It's quite tricky conditions at the moment, very light wind. We expect quite a lot of shifts the next 2 days. So you have to keep your tongue right in the mouth here and stay calm and easy, and I think just sail a boat as fast as possible in the light air we're going to have.
Taking a more northerly track with Swedish match were EF Language, whose skipper was pleased to find occasional bursts of boat speed, but was under no illusions about the shifting nature of the wind conditions.
Been upwind pretty much this whole leg. Just had a good last 20-hour period where we moved ourselves into second place. Just past Swedish Match, which is down here about 1.5 miles to leeward. We just simply sailed higher and faster and went right over them. That was fun. Still about 1,400 miles to go to the finish. And I think the lead will change hands several more times between now and then. It's just, it feels like a very fluky, tricky leg all the way.
EF Language weren't the only ones finding it tough. Swedish Match didn't care much for the conditions either, with another long day on the rail in prospect.
It's been pretty uncomfortable for the first part of the leg, and by the looks of things we're going to be on the wind for the majority of this leg, which in sailing terms is not very promising. Whitbread 60s don't go dramatically well to windward, and as you can see, the guys around you are fizzing at the eyeballs of the pure excitement of this style of sailing.
In a group of 4 boats furthest north were Merrick Cup, who'd stayed north to their cost in leg 2. Again, it was how best to skirt the shifting area of high pressure that was causing its skipper most concern.
As you can see, I'm sitting on the rail here. We're upwind and have been upwind since the start. There's a big split in the fleet now, north and south. There's 2 very distinct schools of thought on how to get through to Bat Strait, which is around 800 miles away. One is to go south and try and get under the high, and the other is to stay north and beat up over the top of the high. We're in the northern group, really hoping that the high pushes in underneath and glasses out and traps the boats to the south of us, and that we keep wind up over the top. And with the results of last leg and this leg so important to us, it's a really very, very worrying time for us.
So at the midway point in the leg, and with the lead changing constantly, EF Language held a nominal advantage over Swedish Match, with Toshiba in third, leading the group of boats in the north comprising of Chessie Racing, Silk Cut and Merrick Cup. In the south, Innovation Caverna's move had yet to pay real dividends. But with the investment already made, theirs was a position that might have been causing the rest of the fleet some anxiety. Day 6 and the fleet had split into 4 groups. Toshiba, Chessie and Silk Cut furthest north, Merit Cup and EF Education further south. Below them were EF Language, Swedish Match and Brunel Synergy, but furthest south, Innovation Caverna, out on a limb, but still, they believed, in contention.
Hello, it's Marcel Priest, navigator on board Innovation Caverna. As you can see on the screen, we've taken a more southerly route than the rest of the fleet. Outlook for the next few days is that we expect cell of high pressure to move through. We'll go light, probably lose a little bit on that, but after that the northwesterly wind will pick up. First in the south, and we expect some decent gains out of that, at least enough to be in the top 3 going through Bass Strait.
Managing to hold on to second place despite earlier problems with their mast was Swedish Match. But the rest of the fleet were not far behind, and a close lookout had to be kept. Magnus Waxen duly stepped in.
Sorry, the footage is getting very bouncy. That's how it is up here. 30 meters over the water, and some old swells catching us from the side.
Whilst the whole fleet was tightly bunched, it was EF Language who were managing to keep their noses out in front. On board, skipper Paul Kayard and navigator Mark Rudiger were locked in tactical discussions above deck. Down below, however, things were a little more mundane, at least for Justin Clupper.
We check our gear. Let's check the keel for weed, eh? Have a look. Down here. Oh, it looks quite clean. No weed on there. Cool. Let's go somewhere else. Sometimes we come in here and check the position. That's always handy to know. A little bit of weather doesn't hurt either. Oh, look at that.
On sister ship EF Education, the girls may have been towards the back of the fleet, but spirits on board were still high as the prospect of Christmas in Sydney drew ever closer. But it wasn't all laughs. There was still the usual checks and routine maintenance to be carried out.
Okay, we're at the top of the rig again on EF Education. We're on the wind, and as you can see, it's pretty bumpy. I don't really like coming up the mast when it's on the wind. We're looking at doing a rig check, which means I have to check all the fittings on the mast, make sure nothing's come loose, and it's all okay. As we go over waves, it's really bumpy like that, and it's really hard to hang on. Now I've settled down again. Nice helmet, whoever that was.
In the same group as the girls were Grant Dalton's crew aboard Merit Cup. Keeping a brave face on proceedings, they might have been, but they weren't going anywhere fast. In the group furthest to the north, Silk Cut, Toshiba and Chessie Racing were jostling for position in a race that kept them all in close sight of one another. But as the boats headed towards King Island at the entrance of Bass Strait, EF Language continued to head the fleet, although the lead was to change hands many times. Moving up from the south as they'd hoped and into second position were Innovation Caverna, while Swedish Match slipped to third. Silk Cut and Toshiba contested honours in the middle of the fleet. Back in sixth behind them, Merit Cup and Grant Dalton were followed by Brunel Synergy and EF Education. Some 25 miles off the pace at this stage, though, were Chessie Racing. Sydney, the cultural capital of Australia, and soon to be the next stop for the Whitbread fleet. And when the 9 boats arrive in town, there'll be plenty on offer. For the informative, the Sydney Opera House and one of Australia's most enduring images. But if culture doesn't appeal, perhaps something a little closer to the sailor's heart will. The National Maritime Museum offers a unique chance to glimpse the historic Australia 2, winner of the 1983 America's Cup, the first boat to beat the Americans in the history of the event, and the first to sport the unique wing keel.
Everybody in Australia remembers when we won the America's Cup in 1983. There were yellow and green balloons in every local shop. People stayed up all night long watching the yacht race. In fact, one of the most famous things that most Australians will tell you about is the Prime Minister at the time, Bob Hawke, declared the next day a national holiday. And it was a national holiday for everybody because we won the America's Cup.
Or for those eager to stay on the water, there's always the Sydney-Hobart race, due to start on Boxing Day, 4 days after the Whitbread fleet arrives. It's renowned for attracting some of the best sailors in the world. If a more radical ride appeals, the 18-foot skiff offers a hairy and alternative way of crossing the harbour. For something a little more relaxing or water sports of a different kind, the sailors can head off to one of many beaches that Sydney is famous for, or a little further afield are the Blue Mountains, where there's no sea in sight. Only a beautiful and scenic national park in which to while away the time. But first, the 9 boats have to arrive. Here, close to the heart of the city, in Darling Harbour. The fleet found on its arrival in the Bass Strait that much of its earlier work had been for nothing. As the fleet found itself being compressed once more, it was Swedish match Andy F. Langridge who disputed the lead. Paul Cayard falling foul of the shifting winds on the approach to King Island.
We just passed King Island off the northwest tip of Tasmania, and we had to make 2 tacks to get around it. That was a little bit unfortunate for us, as the others have all laid the island either above it or below it without tacking. So we had a 20-mile lead on the last skid. That's going to cost us probably 6 or 7 miles of our lead, but some leads better than no lead.
The next threat to EF Langridge appeared to come from the resurgent Toshiba, which had also navigated a course north of King Island and was now shadowing the leader. Not that Swedish match had fallen off the pace further south, despite the rigging problems suffered earlier in the leg. Also in contention at this stage, in their position further north, were Laurie Smith and the British boat, but they too were finding conditions difficult to read.
Sailing in the Bass Strait, about 400 miles from Sydney, and we've crossed jives, I think, with almost every boat in the fleet, except the girls and Swedish match. Place changes, just bizarre. Schedule before last, we were 2nd, now we're 5th. Next schedule could be 1st. Wind is shifting all over the place. It's a bit of a typical day in the Bass Strait.
Keeping tabs on Silk Cut was Chessie Racing, at times only a few hundred metres away from a British boat. With their inspirational skipper, 57-year-old George Collins, experiencing his first leg of the race, the Chessie crew had rallied to his battle cry and were now reaping the rewards. The crew on board Innovation Caverna already knew they were in a race. Having survived a damaged mast earlier in the leg, the Norwegian boat became the first of this year's fleet to lose a man overboard, when Knut Frostad's bowman and sailmaker Albie Pratt took a dunking in heavy seas.
It's been quite a hard night, actually. We started with losing a guy overboard and managed to pick him up, and after that we had severe seas, very big waves, and we had to slow down the boat because we have a rig that is not 100%. So it's been a very hard night, and I'm very happy that we are here now in looks like it's 2nd position.
But the happiest man on Caverna was a rather sheepish Albie Pratt. Following their disappointing performance in Leg 2, Merrick Cup was once again struggling to stay with the leaders. But skipper Grant Dalton knew there was still plenty to play for.
In a few hours' time, it'll be 8 days at sea. It's just after dawn. We went round King Island and Bass Strait behind us about 4 or 5 hours ago. And now we're running into a head sea with the spinnaker up. We can't even get a masthead spinnaker up, even though it's not blowing too hard because of the way the boat's bouncing. We can see Toshiba, and just in front of us, we can see Chessie Racing, EF Education has just dropped back over the horizon. And there's about 20 miles separating all the boats now, with just 500 miles to go. So it's all on for this one, that's for sure.
Having briefly flirted with the middle order, Brunel, led by new skipper Roy Heiner, had now resumed its perennial battle with EF Education at the rear of the fleet. Further forward, the more fancied boats made their moves for the final sweep into Sydney, knowing that one bad decision could cost them a place, or worse, several. With 70 miles of sailing to go and about 6 hours to the finish at Sydney Opera House, the Whitbread fleet were flying. Paul Cayard's EF Langridge had dropped Swedish match and now only had 1st place on their mind. Krantz's spinnaker was only a few minutes behind, though, equally determined to repeat his first position of the last leg. And it wasn't all about closing on the boat in front. All of the crews were working to shake the attentions of chasing opponents. Chesney Racing doing everything possible to accelerate from Merit Cup and Caverna, who in turn could have easily thrown a line to each other. On board Merit, Dalton knew he must win this battle. And so it continued behind, with Laurie Smith and Paul Stanbridge fighting for 6th. The battle at the front was equally tight. With just hours to go, any number of boats were still in contention to cross the line first. EF Language going fast, but under real pressure. By 1:30 in the morning on the 23rd of December, and after 9.5 days and over 2,200 miles of sailing, Paul Kayard and EF Language crossed the line first, just 5 minutes ahead of Swedish Match, with the rest of the fleet incredibly close behind. And the relief on board was tangible. Victory had not been certain until the last couple of minutes. For Gunnar Krantz and Swedish Match, it looked like it could be another top 3 podium position. They upset the entire fleet by winning the last leg, and even with a damaged rig, they were fighting for 2nd under the shadows of the Opera House, under real pressure from Chesney Racing. It was an exceptionally tense finish. This was Whitbread match racing as we'd never seen it before. Chesney Racing and Swedish Match were pulling in everything to gain the critical advantage, with the line only a few hundred metres ahead. With Swedish Match in 2nd, failing to open their spinnaker at a crucial moment, Chesney Racing had a chance to claim 2nd. They too were having problems filling their spinnaker. The wind was getting lighter. Tension was on board. Matt Humphries was steering Swedish Match across the line. In the end, though, Chesney Racing missed 2nd by just 52 seconds. Soon after crossing the finish line, EF Language and a triumphant crew were welcomed into Darling Harbour, where the boats will be docked for the next 2 weeks.
I've been in a lot of tight races before, and to finish after 2,400 miles, everybody within, I don't know, 20 miles, it's just an incredible race, and the guys did what we had to do to pull it off.
Next up was Swedish Match, tired after a successful battle warding off Chesney Racing.
We are happy, but you know, if you have it in your hand, you get the taste of blood for the first place. You want to have it. So of course we are satisfied and really happy over our 2nd place, but we really wanted that 1st place.
Back in 3rd, there was a big moment for Chesney Racing and owner George Collins, who couldn't be happier at the end of his first ever Whitbread leg.
Yeah, it was just unreal. I mean, you know, a lot of pounding and a lot of hard sailing, a lot of boredom. And then the last couple of days where, particularly coming up the coastline, I mean, the coastline here is just fabulous. And to have the 9 boats together, plus the coastline, I mean, it was just, it was spectacular.
This leg had been full of mini-battles, with the boats nearly always in sight of one another. Grant Dalton's Merit Cup had fought with Innovation Caverna all the way up the harbour. And as with earlier boats, for these two, the race could have begun just a few hours before, rather than 9.5 days earlier. After 2 podium finishes, this time Innovation Caverna had to settle for 5th, as Merit finished 1.5 minutes in front. So 5 boats had crossed the line within 10 minutes. Behind them came Toshiba and Silk Cut in a ferocious battle for 6th place. At the beginning of the leg, neither would have wanted it, but now they were fighting for 6th tooth and nail. Under 30 minutes behind the winning boat, they were scraping for the minor places. In previous races, where results were based on elapsed time, a finish like this would have been exciting, but of little overall significance. However, with the new Formula 1 style point scoring system, places matter, be they minutes or days apart. As Silk Cut and Toshiba slugged it out, there was at last the chance of a breather for Merit Cup skipper Grant Dalton. Few Whitbread legs have been closer or more demanding, even for a veteran like him. Close in Merit's wake, Innovation Caverna limped into dock with their weakened mast. For them, the leg had brought a sea of misfortune, which had had some bearing on their overall performance. It was Toshiba who eventually triumphed in the all-Brit battle for 6th place. Paul Stanbridge edging out Laurie Smith for the 50 points on offer and welcoming the challenge of a tight finish with open arms.
Is it frustrating? No, it makes it more exciting. Because even this morning, we didn't give up. We were still flat-out racing, you know. And we still could have won it this morning, you know. We could have won. We didn't, but, you know, it was possible.
Not so happy with the crew on Silk Cut. For them, a mistake in the last stages of the leg took them too close to shore. A remit, perhaps, of more than their fair share of sleepless nights on an already exhausting leg. Laurie Smith was feeling the pace as much as his young crew.
They're right.
For the last 3 days, no one's had any sleep now.
They're right.
You sort of go through phases of completely falling over, and then you wake up again and you're off again. And the problem is, you know, everyone gets tired, and then decisions get harder and stuff like that, because you have to work and stay awake so long in the 2 nights ago just to get into that position.
For the Dutch and skipper Roy Heiner, 8th position was an improvement on what had gone before. They had for the first time beaten EF Education, but not easily.
Really very, very difficult to get by them, and they were very fast and sailing extremely well, and we saw them making jibes when the men were making jibes and breaking sails, and the women did it fantastically.
Christine Guillou brought the fleet home as the all-women's EF Education entered a now calm Sydney Harbour. No disgrace for the last 2 boats, though. The fleet had all come in within 2 hours of one another, and each had their own very personal memories of a dramatic leg. For Leah Newbold on EF Education, it was a battle with Merritt Cup that gave the most satisfaction.
In between, we had 4 days where we were jostling with Merritt and fairly light breezes and flat water, and it was great. I mean, the whole time we were just swapping positions. You know, they would be in front, then we'd be in front. Well done.
Yeah, really well. Really well.
So did we.
So, with 2 wins and a 4th, EF Language have established a 35-point lead over Innovation Caverna. Swedish Match are up to 3rd, impressive after that 8th in leg 1. Merritt Cup are 4th, whilst arriving in Sydney in 3rd has pushed Chesney Racing up to 5th position. 2 of the race favourites, Silk Cut and Toshiba, in 6th and 7th, need to find big results quickly, whilst at the back, EF Education and Brunel Sanergy are starting to lose touch. So a marvellous conclusion to this 3rd leg, and another triumph for Paul Cayard aboard EF Language, back at the top as race leader. He and the rest of the crews now get a chance to wind down after the excitement of the last 10 days before gearing up once more for the start of leg 4 to Auckland on January the 4th.